Oh, it's Galen. I was gonna say, who's squawking public service? That's Galen's.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm trying to get computers fixed this morning and having issues. So
Oh,
Is that an omen?
yeah, maybe.
okay, where's that coming from? Me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I may actually have got it working.
We don't see your pretty face, but
That's because my camera's falling. Can you now? No.
You're actually overmodulating.
yeah.
I don't know why that would be.
Trying to figure out why I'm hearing all kinds of crazy stuff. Are you hearing any crazy stuff? No.
No.
I'm hearing some audio fragments rehashing themselves. As long as you're not, that's okay. That means I can fix something here and make it work.
So now we know what makes Galen run.
What?
Look at his picture.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Breakfast of
That's-
Champions.
that's his product placement. He gets money from Mountain Dew to put that on the center of the page.
Trust me, anything I get from them is far overset by the amount of their product I use.
Wait, your audio is way hot there. Gil.
Wow, you're overmodulating.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
There you go. Got my audio straight. Morning.
Yeah, so I just went and got my second cup of coffee, so maybe I'm starting to come alive now.
I'm feeling a lot warmer now that Mark said it was -1 up there in Milwaukee area, so I'm doing better.
Is my audio any different now?
Still hot.
Still hot.
Not as, but yeah.
Yeah, you're about 20 dB lower, but you still need another 20
Exactly.
dB down and you're
Yeah,
good.
you're like 20 over 9.
Yeah,
And I'm guessing it's probably 1,000 over 9 now.
it's better.
Better.
It's getting better.
Hey, it's actually maybe testing. Yeah, there it's dropping it.
Yeah, that's not a lot better.
Is it better now?
Yes.
What are all those red lights going off? Huh?
One of the atheists that I've debated did that. By the
By the way, Galen,
Yes.
I sent a letter to the governor of the state because I have an access to, thanks to the previous governor, to send a letter outlining the importance of having individual EOCs.
Yeah, I'll talk about that here in just a minute. Let me get my camera and mic fixed here.
Hey, now we can see your face.
Oh, well, I need to fix that. If you haven't guessed, I'm at the office this morning, so, and actually out in the EOC.
Yeah.
Okay, so is my audio okay for meeting purposes?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
What'd you say?
Hey, we've been fighting audio issues with one of the MSTAT radios. We took over dispatch for them here a couple of weeks ago, and they've got, I don't know whether it's always the same truck, but I think it may not be a truck issue or radio issue. It may be the guy using it, because they'll be rocking along and dispatchers are sitting there, not doing, much. And all of a sudden, MSTAT 41. And I'm telling you, it takes them out of their chairs when this one guy's on. Okay, so Mark, the deal with the legislation, we were pretty sure that was going to not go anywhere to begin with. Nobody seems to know why that legislator introduced that bill. He supposedly, they've talked, it's had its 2 readings, and it should die there. It shouldn't be assigned to a committee. Our local guy here, Mark McBride, when he learned of it, he's like, no, this isn't going to happen. And he's on the committee that helps assign them. So
Good.
And apparently too, this legislator, you can only have like 7 of your introduced bills heard. And I think he introduced like 60, 70, 80, however many. But he'd said that was not going to be one of them that he pushed to have heard.
Well, that's good to hear.
Well, it was dumb, and nobody seems to know. Nobody's owning up to having talked to him. Where he's at up there, there's a couple of municipal guys, and the county guy got his job supposedly because of being brother-in-law to somebody.
What? No way.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the real story is. That one would be pretty difficult probably to find out. So.
The real story is we should all be thankful that the legislature is part-time. If they were full-time, they could wreak a lot more havoc.
Hey, Galen.
Yes, sir.
Apparently that thought process is a little bit infectious. Have you talked to our counterpart in Lincoln County?
No. Are you talking about the request that she sent out a day or 2 ago for some letters of endorsement?
Yeah. So
No,
I was just curious if that wasn't stemming from some of that same thought process.
Roger, I have to.
Hey, Mr. Kitch, while I have you here, are you going to run your sirens today?
That answer would be not only no, but no.
Okay. Thank you. I shall send out my official club email and let people know. I figured it. I think everybody else figured too, but
No, we're not running. David said he wasn't running. Oklahoma City's not running.
Right. Thank you.
So we can pretty much guess that Newcastle's not going to run.
Probably not Noble either, but
it was fairly nice out when I came in, other than being cold. But it's that cold isn't good to the batteries, and it's
Houston, Texas. We are taking early check-ins for the Saturday.
And the mechanicals, if they got any moisture in them, it freezes up and causes them to break. And everybody's scared to death because of the media, thanks, concerning what's coming up. So
we've got another station here this morning, N9KRG.
Bob, I keep muting you, but your audio is
He's in Fond du Lac City.
Here we go.
It's much better.
That's the 3rd mute, so. There we go.
guess I ought to turn my radios down too, huh?
Yeah, we've heard a couple of those. But,
Hey, Galen, the
MSAT 41.
in the emergency management trailer command center, mobile command center, the radios that you have mounted to the upper cabinets, the ones you have like four of them together.
Yes.
What kind of radios are those? When you're walking down the hall and you go into the main room and
Are you
look
talking about on the comm side or the other side?
well, I'm thinking to the right, as you look to the right when you first walk in that main room in the mobile unit.
So there's only 2 radios or there's 6?
They all look the same, so there might be the ones with the 6.
Okay, well, let me talk about the side that has 6, and then we'll start the meeting here. The side that has 6 is the comms area. The top 2 radios are Motorola APX 6500s, I'm sorry. The bottom 2 are 8500s. They're all Motorola's and they're all APX series. The difference in the top and the bottom radios is that the top radio is 800 megahertz only. The bottom radios are tri-band. And then the 2 middle radios are a FT 851 on top and a ID 51 on the bottom. Hammerheads. That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, by the clock in the EOC, it's 9:31, so we're 1 minute late getting started here. Good morning, everybody. This is the February edition of the South Canadian Amateur Radio Society's monthly meeting. Unfortunately, we still aren't able to meet in person. Hopefully, one of these days soon, we'll be able to correct that. I'd like to thank everybody that's here today. Mark Klein, do we have a way to know who all's on or how many we have on each of the 2?
We do. And I'll be watching the YouTube for comments. So if any of the YouTube folks want to leave some comments, I'll transfer them over.
So I assume that we have a number of people. I haven't got mine set up right to see exactly how many we have.
We're about 40 right now between the 2 is where we're at right now.
Cool deal.
45. Just went up.
And hopefully that number will continue to go up. So I assume everybody can see that I'm Gayland. I'm WX5MOR. I'd love to be able to go through and do introductions like we normally do, but I don't know how you would manage that because we can't point at people easily. So we'll just go with saying we have a good representation this morning, and we appreciate everybody taking their time out of this cold morning to drop by and talk about ham radio for a while. Just to get started here with a few procedural or administrative things. Your club's executive committee did meet Wednesday evening and discussed a few things. I don't know that we really discussed anything of great, serious stuff for the club. We did talk a little bit about field day, and maybe we'll discuss that here in just a little bit. And some administrative stuff and so on. That's a cool closet you've got there, Gary Skaggs. There you go. I do want to, let me get my notes here. We do need for Mark Klein, do we have a way to take a vote or not?
Just by raising hands, showing hands. Yes, we can do that. But do we want to do a presentation first?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do our presentation, and then we'll come back and finish up with some club business. Mark, go ahead.
Wayne, go ahead. You can be the big introducer since you've practiced.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, we have a good presenter today. His name is, and I apologize if I butcher your name, Mark, but we have Mark Siegesmund, who is the president of Custom Computer Services, who owns West Mountain Radio. And yes, I am reading this online. So anyway, he's going to tell us about some good stuff that he's got going up there at West Mountain. So Mark, you have the com.
All right. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Got some slides.
No, I'm looking at my rig runner right now.
You're coming through.
I'm coming through okay?
Real quick, I'd like to ask everybody to mute your Zoom. If you're not talking, please mute your Zoom so it doesn't interrupt the presentation. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to cover let me see if I can get control of this. A number of topics having to do with DC power distribution, batteries, solar power. It's obviously these are huge topics, but I'm going to cover some of the things that people call us a lot about and ask about, and there's a lot of interest in, and hopefully you guys will be able to get some good ideas here. And I know everybody here knows about Ohm's law, but I want to just kind of have a demonstration here to kind of illustrate what some of the big problems are. Sometimes seeing the numbers will really bring it home. On the top there, I've got a 12-volt battery connected to a 6-watt light bulb. The loss is about 1% of the energy across that cable. On the bottom, I moved up to a 60-watt spotlight, and the loss increases to 7%. You can imagine what happens when you go to a 100-watt radio or a 1500-watt radio, what that loss is going to look like. So I just want everybody to see the numbers and understand the problems that we're trying to deal with here. Here's a table. On that previous diagram, I was using a 12 gauge cable. So I had that 7% power loss. If I had used an 8 gauge cable there, the loss would have only been 3%. And if I would have used the 22 gauge cable, the loss would have been 2/3 of the power being lost in the cable. And that's going to be enough to melt the cable. Where's the power go? It goes into heat, obviously. That's why the cable would melt. We've got a nice calculator on our website. Go to calculators, find cable size. And on the right-hand side there, you can see what the table looks like. If it shows up red, that means the insulation is going to melt off of your cable. But just tell it how long the cable you want and how much current you're planning on drawing, and it'll give you the loss for your cable. And that includes both the red and the black wires. Connectors are a particular problem when you're drawing high current. I want to start in the lower right corner there. That a lot of you recognize that as an HF kind of connector. What they've done here is they're running 3 conductors for the plus and 3 conductors for the negative. And that allows them to split the current draw among the contacts. So even though the contacts may have a somewhat high resistance, by tripling it, they've reduced the overall heat that the connector is going to generate. At 5 amps, it's 0.075 watts. At 40 amps, it's about 5 watts. And the connector can probably handle that at 5 watts. And the reason I suddenly started talking about watts is you can think of watts in terms of the amount of heat that's going to be generated from the connector. Now, unlike a cable where that heat is distributed over a long length, the heat is going to be concentrated on just that connector. So you're concerned about it starting to melt the plastic. Right above it, we've got the concentric power jack that's used in a lot of DC electronics. Use that jack for 40 amps and you're going to lose 48 watts worth of energy. So that's going to melt very quickly. In the other corner, the banana jack, 40 amps, 16 watts of energy are going to be lost in that kind of a connector. The connector above that is the one that we're recommending for amateur radio use, the Anderson power pole connectors. At 40 amps, we have less than 1 watt of energy being lost in that connector. The resistance of that connector is 0.0005 ohms. So there's very little loss, and that's one of the reasons that we're recommending it for the amateur radio use where you're using a lot of current. And a few words about the Anderson power poles. The 15, 30, 45 amp connectors are completely interchangeable. It's the same housing, it's just how much metal and what the size is for the wire contacts. They're genderless, no male and female. Any power pole plugs into any power pole. It's impossible to put them incorrectly, so you're not going to have a reverse polarity issue. You always want to crimp these. Don't solder them. The resistance of the solder is quite a bit higher than what you're going to get if you crimp. And again, at the high current, you don't want any additional resistance in there. So always crimp them and crimp them very tightly. If you crimp them, you actually get a cold weld. And I know there's a lot of people that are suspicious about crimping, thinking, well, that's just kind of a tight fit around the cable. It really is a cold weld if you crimp it properly, and you're going to have a lot less power loss. These things are UV safe. You can leave them out in the sunlight, but they're not waterproof. Switches, you also have the similar problem that you have with contacts. There's a lot of resistance, and they tend to melt. It's really hard to find a good switch for use in amateur radio just because of the power. So solid state switches are the better way to go. But I've just got some pictures here and what the current ratings are on those switches. That 100 amp switch, that's what they use for chargers on electric vehicles. If you have a problem with power loss or contacts, it's really easy to find them. What you want to do is key down and transmit, and then go around with a meter across each of the contacts or each of the wires and measure the voltage drop. And I've got a diagram here, like a half volt voltage drop. That means you're losing 10 watts across that connection. So you can get a pretty good idea as to if the contact is dirty, if it's not making a good connection, if it's poorly crimped, just by looking for voltage drops. Again, you want to do that while you're transmitting. I'm going to talk a couple grounding problems that I want to illustrate here for you. A lot of people have problems with grounding. I want to just cover two issues that we hear an awful lot. In this situation here, what we've got is a little weather station up on somebody's tower. And the weather station has like a phone cable coming down to a unit that sits on the wall and plugs into the wall. We also have on that same tower a coax going up to the antenna from a base station radio, a power supply. The power supply is plugged into the wall. Here's the problem. On the right side there, I'm showing the intended path is that green loop there between the power supply and the radio. That's where you want your ground to go, between the power supply and the radio. There's this unintended path, the blue wire. The power supply is going into the outlet. The outlet is going to the weather station. The weather station is following that phone cable up the tower. And since it's connected to the tower, it then continues up to the coax and back down to the radio. So that radio actually has two ground paths to ground. When you transmit, it's going to try to split that current draw. Say you're drawing 20 amps between those two paths. And obviously the phone cable is just going to vaporize very quickly. Vehicle grounding, another common thing. The vehicle chassis is a great conductor. A lot of people want to go ahead and use that as their ground because it is such a great conductor, and it'll save you running one more wire to the trunk or something like that. Here we've got an amplifier in the trunk. The problem with that is when you use the vehicle chassis as one of the conductors, you're sharing that conductor with all sorts of other noise sources. The computer in the car, the ignition, the car radio, and the draw from those devices is going to be superimposed on the conductor going to the radio, and that noise is going to appear at the amplifier. Batteries. Start with the Rogani chart. This is what battery manufacturers just live for. What this chart is showing you is the vertical graph is showing you the instantaneous power that the battery has. The horizontal is showing you the energy that the battery has, and both axes are divided by the weight of the battery. So again, battery manufacturers are very conscious about the weight of the battery and how much energy you've got. That purple line is the supercapacitor. That shows you what that would look like. The blue line is the typical lead acid battery, and that yellow line is a typical lithium battery. As you move toward the right of the chart, it's considered a better battery source. You've got more energy per pound, essentially. The green mark there, that's gasoline. Again, the battery manufacturers are always comparing themselves to gasoline. I'm going to cover lead acid batteries first here. Always fuse the lead acid battery, put the fuse near the battery. If anything shorts, a screwdriver gets in there or something like that, you want the fuse to blow. It can be oversized. The 50 amp fuse, 100 amp fuse is fine. And even if it's a fixed fuse that you just solder into the wire, because you hopefully you'll never blow it. But if you do blow it, you'd rather blow the fuse than have the battery blow up. We recommend using a sealed battery, not a wet battery. I know a lot of people call us and say, well, hey, you said in your manual you shouldn't use a wet battery. What's wrong with it? The technology of the battery is just fine. It's just that they require a lot of maintenance. And if you're moving them from one place to another, there's a spill hazard. And the way amateur radio people typically will use these batteries, sealed is going to be much better than trying to move around or having the basement or have next to your radio, basically a hazard. Don't keep them in an airtight enclosure, but you can keep them inside in a room that's fine. They do vent a little bit of gas, but that gas will dilute in the air just fine. But don't put them in a sealed container, because if you put them in a sealed container, then that gas concentrates over time and that will become a hazard. And then obviously try and dispose of the batteries properly. There's a lot of places that take a free drop off on these lead acid batteries. This is the flooded battery I told you guys not to use. Just to give you an illustration of what it looks like. We basically have lead plates in there, and then it's filled with an acid that just floods the plates. This is a newer type of battery. This is the sealed lead acid battery. What they've done is they have these patties of acid that they squeeze between the plates. So instead of flooding the whole battery, you just have these little patties of acid. It's a lighter weight battery, and you don't have to keep filling it with acid the way you do with the flooded battery. There's no evaporation here. This is a picture of a typical starter battery. Now this is important because there's a lot of temptation to go out and buy a battery at Kmart or something like that, that you would use in an automobile. The automobile batteries, what they've done is they either drill holes in the plates, or they rough up the plates. I think what's really common now is they use kind of like a steel wool pasty solution that they fill the plates with. What they're trying to do is they're trying to increase surface area. The more surface area that you have in the battery, the more instantaneous power that you get out of the battery. You don't get more amp hours out of it, but you get more of the instantaneous power. So if you want to start your car in cold weather, having a battery that has a lot of surface area on the plates really helps. The problem with that is the more surface area you have in the plates, the higher corrosion rate you have. The batteries tend to corrode when they're run down, not when they're full up. On a car battery, the car battery spends most of its life filled up. But if you're using it like for radio use, a lot of times your batteries run down a little bit, and that will really promote corrosion. So these batteries won't last very long at all for a typical amateur radio use. And these are the starter batteries, and you want to stay away from them. This is a depth of discharge chart. This illustrates a little bit what I was just talking about. If you run your battery down to say 50% and then charge it back up again, run it down to 50%, charge it back up again. This chart shows you get what, maybe 1,200 cycles out of the battery, and then the battery's done. You go down to 80%, same kind of a thing. It looks like you're getting like 600 cycles out of that battery. But if the battery spends most of its life charged up, you only go down 10%, back up to charge, down to 10%. You're going to get like 6,500 cycles out of that battery. So this shows the depth of discharge for a standard lead acid sealed battery. This is an AGM battery. The AGM batteries are lighter weight and more inexpensive. Instead of the acid patties, what they have these little envelopes of fiberglass that are infused with acid, and they slip those envelopes over the plates. Here's the depth of discharge chart. The orange line is showing you the AGM battery. The blue line is the same battery that we were looking at earlier, the sealed lead acid. On the AGM battery, you can see if you go 50% down, back up, 50% down, back up again, you're going to get like 200 cycles out of that battery at best, and then its life is gone. So the AGM batteries do not like to be discharged. That makes them more suitable for maybe a backup at a base station where you might only use it 4 times a year or something. In that case, you know, you're not going to ever hit that, say, 200 mark for the 50% discharge. This is a chart here of how a lead acid battery discharges. The red line shows the typical discharge on that battery. The green line is the 10.5 volts that the battery manufacturers rate the batteries at. So you can see that you're getting pretty much what they stamped on the side of the battery, a little bit less always on lead acid. You have to really charge the lead acid batteries exactly the way the manufacturers say to get 100% out of them. The problem is most radios want at least 11.7 volts for transmit. If you have that 11.7 volts for transmit, that's the blue line. You're only getting 66% of the life out of the battery. And if you account for just voltage drops at your station, the yellow line is probably more realistic. So you're probably going to get only 40% of your life out of that battery before the battery is no good for transmit. This is a similar chart, only what I did here is I cycled between receive and transmit. So I'm going between, I think it's 2 amps and 20 amps, 2 amps, 20 amps, 30 seconds each. And this shows how the battery discharges. Now, each time I'm transmitting, you can see the voltage drops about a volt or so. That changes this chart quite a bit. So now we're only getting, say, 35% out of the battery at the 11.7 volt range. And you're only getting 12% out of the battery if you take into account the losses in the cables and stuff like that. So this is just something you need to be aware of when you're using the lead acid battery. Even though it's stamped 80 amp hours on the side, you need to realize how much you're actually going to get out of it before the thing is not going to be good for transmit anymore. I'm going to move on to lithium batteries. Pretty much when you hear about lithium batteries, you think about them starting on fire, them overheating. Ever since lithium batteries came out, you started to hear stories about people saying, hey, my cell phone's getting really hot, had to throw it into the garbage can, that kind of a thing. We talk a lot with battery manufacturers. What they're telling us is that about, on average, 1 out of every 100,000 battery packs is going to have a thermal event. And my sense is over the last several years, they've kind of stopped trying to figure out why. It seems like the consumer market has kind of accepted that, and it's very hard for them to recreate that in the lab. It's just something that happens. Vehicles are worse. About 1 out of every 1,000 vehicles will have a thermal event, and about 1 out of 200,000 phones. It's just kind of the statistics that they've been having over the years. It's not like a good manufacturer versus a bad manufacturer. In the early days, they were blaming the chargers, cheap chargers versus more expensive chargers, or leaving the phones on the charger and so on and so forth. In the end, it has nothing to do with any of that. It's probably got to do with the little lithium metal fibers that are inside the phone, somehow penetrating the plastic between the polarities or something like that. But basically, all of the batteries do it, and it's roughly the same rate, depending on the manufacturer. What happens after the thermal event, whether it starts on fire, explodes, or just gets warm, that does have to do a bit with the manufacturing and what kind of plastics were used in the shell of the battery and so on and so forth. But this is just something you need to be aware of. There are all sorts of chemistries of lithium batteries, and it seems like there's a new one every year. The one on the bottom of my chart here is probably the most popular. It's what you're used in a lot of the cell phones and laptops. The one on the top is the one that I would recommend for amateur radio use. And that's got the iron phosphate in it. The reason it's good is because it's, first of all, it's considered a little safer than the other technologies. And that means as far as you pound a nail into it, you know, how much it's going to explode. It's also considered very good for an instantaneous high load. So you start to draw 20 amps out of that battery instantaneously when you transmit. The iron phosphate is going to be a much better battery at dealing with that. But there are lots of technologies, and like I say, they come out with new ones every year. And I know there's one kicking around right now. It's basically iron phosphate, and they've added a little bit of magnesium in there. And those seem to be just about as good as the iron phosphates as well. But yeah, I would stick with the LifePo 4 batteries for amateur radio. Here's the depth of discharge chart for lithium batteries. The green line is the lithium battery. The blue and the orange lines are the same data I gave you earlier. Go to that 50% discharge. I'm getting 6,000 cycles out of that lithium battery, going down to 50%, back up to 100, down to 50%, back up to 100. So you can see this is one of the areas that the lithium battery really shines in. And I should also point out, since we're looking at this chart, the lithium battery you can run all the way down to 100% discharge, and it's not going to matter as much. I'm still getting 2,000 cycles out of that battery, going all the way down to 100. Temperature, the lithium battery is fussier. The blue line shows a lead acid battery across temperature. It's actually performs a little better when it's hot. And you can run it all the way down to very cold temperatures. Now the capacity decreases, but the battery is still operating. The lithium battery, on the other hand, once you go over 80 degrees, the life of the battery starts to reduce significantly. And once you go below 32 degrees, if you're charging the lithium battery, you run into a serious danger of the battery being damaged or actually exploding. So like a lot of your cell phones and stuff, they're designed so that if the outside temperature is less than 32, they won't charge the phone at all. Discharging is just as much of a concern if you discharge at a high rate. So again, if you're transmitting or something like that, where you're drawing the 20 amps from the battery, that would be a concern below 32 degrees. Here's that 30 seconds transmit, 30 seconds receive on the lithium battery. This is another place where the lithium battery really shines. Even using the yellow line, I'm getting 76% of the battery capacity out of that lithium battery. Remember, that was down around 20, I think it's 26% on the lead acid battery. So I'm getting a lot more bang for the buck. Now, I know a lot of you are going to look at the lithium batteries, look at the price and how much expensive they are. But you need to compare the amp hours here. These are amp hours that you're actually going to be able to use versus amp hours that you're paying for that you can't use. Just a couple of things about charging. This is important. The lead acid battery charge algorithm looks like this. We wait for the battery voltage to get up to a certain level. And then when we reach that level, we let the current draw drop down to a certain amount. And then on the lead acid battery, we go into a float stage where we just continue to apply a light current voltage to keep the battery maintained at 13.8 volts. The lithium batteries are different. The first stages look very similar, although they're much fussier about the voltage that they charge at. But once the battery is charged, once the current draw drops below 0.05 C, you want to stop charging the battery because otherwise it will overheat and then you run into other problems. So, and the reason that I'm pointing out the fact that these two charging algorithms are different is, in general, you shouldn't be putting a lithium battery on a lead acid charger because it can damage it. Now, there are some lithium batteries that have electronics in them that will tolerate the lead acid charger, but you have to make sure you're using a battery like that if you're going to, for example, use your your automobile to charge the battery. This is a comparison of the prices. The blue line is the lead acid, yellow is the lithium. If all you're doing is receive only, the lithium's quite a bit more expensive. But if you're talking FM and you spend half of your time talking, the dollars per amp hour are much closer between the lithium and the lead acid. There's a chart on the West Mountain Radio website, again, under the calculator section. This looks a little bit complicated. Let me see if I can cover this. We're talking here, what I circled was somebody who spends 70% of their time talking, and the green line is CW, sorry, 70% of their time keying. You run over to the number of hours that you're looking for. Say you're looking for a 6-hour use out of your battery, and then go down. A 79 amp hour lead acid battery will last about 6 hours if you're doing CW 70% of the time transmitting. Anyway, this chart is on our website, and you can tell it to use different size batteries, lithium or lead acid, whatever you're interested in. And this will help you size your battery a little bit as to what kind of battery would be best for you. Amp hours per pound. This is the other place where lithium shines. We're getting like 6 amp hours per pound of battery versus something around less than 1.5 per pound for a standard lead acid battery. Talk a little bit about battery boosting. This is a new product that West Mountain Radio has. Basically what it does is it boosts up the voltage of the battery regardless of what the voltage is to what's going to be suitable for your transmit. We talked earlier about how you want at least 11.7 volts for transmit. If the battery's at 11 volts, this thing will bring it up to whatever you want it to be, 12.5, 13, whatever the radio needs. So this booster can actually get more amp hours out of the battery. It's one of the options that you have versus just allowing the battery to run down like I showed you earlier. Just a price comparison here. A 74 amp hour lead acid battery, $300. A 40 amp hour LiPo battery is $360. Both of those will get you 10 hours of transmit time. If you get that same 74 amp hour lead acid battery, add a booster to it, you get about 15 hours of transmit time. The booster costs an additional about roughly $250 in addition to your $300 for the battery. But if you got a 60 amp hour LiPo battery, you're going to pay $570 for that battery and get the same 15 hours of use out of it. So these are good. I know you guys are YouTubing this, so you can go through the charts later and look at all the numbers and stuff like that. I'm just trying to give you an idea of the booster's not such a bad idea if you want to stick with the lead acid battery. Because remember that that $250, you can reuse that on the next battery as well. Just a quick note here. A lot of people are familiar with the N8XJK booster. Dan originally designed it and wrote a QST article about it. TJ Electronics, from that article, started manufacturing that device because there's so much of a demand for it. Tim passed away a couple of years ago, and we worked out a deal with Dan to redesign the unit to make it more producible for West Mountain Radio. Added some additional features, and we've been manufacturing it now, I think, for about a year. Battery testing. The batteries last 2 to 10 years. 2/3 of the batteries die by the age of 7. We're talking about lead acid batteries here. Expect 5 good years at 77 degrees, 3 years at 90. So you can see where the heat makes a difference. So the guy who's got a battery sitting, outside his garage or something like that down south, he's going to have much more of a problem with life on that battery than the guy who's keeping it in his basement. Typically, when the battery capacity is dropped about 20%, then you've probably exhausted 85% of the battery. that's when we tell people to get a new battery, because it's a matter of months before that thing's going to quickly drop off. Now it's going to go from 20 to 50 very quickly. These are the things that kill a battery. This is a lead acid battery. The biggest thing is corrosion. We talked about that earlier. The main reason that the batteries corrode is when they're not charged. If they're fully charged, they tend not to corrode as much. That's why in a lead acid battery, you want a trickle charge or a maintenance charge as much as possible. Keeping that battery charged up will substantially reduce the corrosion on the battery. Dry out, we talked about the venting of the battery, how it vents some acid. Eventually too much of that acid gets vented and there's not enough acid for the battery to be effective. Those are the two biggest reasons that the batteries will die. I think I just described this slide. There's two popular methods of testing the battery. One is what you do is you put a load under the battery and you see how much the battery drops. Essentially, you're measuring the resistance of the battery. About 60% of the lead acid batteries, you can tell that the battery's about to die, or it's within its last 15% of the life. But it's not 100%. In ours, it's not a true picture of what's going on. The true capacity test, in that case, you drain the battery all the way down, measure how much energy was in it, and usually that can tell you about 95% of the time or better whether the lead acid battery is dying or not. It'll always tell you exactly where you're at as far as capacity goes. But as far as predicting the end of life, it's pretty good as well. Here are some percentages. Again, true capacity versus voltage under load. Voltage under load is what they do when you drive into the service station and ask them to check your battery. True capacity, West Mountain Radio has a device which will just essentially drain down the battery and tell you how much energy was in it. That device is called the CBA. It's really kind of fun, especially if you're at all interested in batteries. This thing can test anything from laptop batteries to car batteries, and basically just tell you what the true number of amp hours are in the battery. And it'll plot things, and you put plots on top of other plots to see how the battery is doing over life. A lot of those charts that you saw in the earlier slides were created from the CBA battery tester. And we are, by the way, we're just now redoing the software on that. It's going to have a much fresher look in about a month. This is the multiple tests on the same screen that we talked about earlier. You can do duty cycle testing like we talked about earlier. We're 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off at different loads. A bunch of the CBAs are rated based on how many watts they can discharge at a time, because you imagine we're taking the energy out of the battery, we're turning it into heat. So the standard unit that most people buy is that 150 watt unit, because that covers most of what we need to do. But they go all the way up. I think we've sold 8,000 watt systems. One cool thing that the CBA does, some of you may have applications for, we have another product called Power Check, which is just an amp meter, voltmeter. It has an internal log. If you log the current draw from some application, say a drone or something, where you're going to measure what the current draw is during takeoff and then during landing and while it's in the air, you can take that profile, put it into a CSV file where you've got a chart of what the current draw was at each second in time. And the CBA has the ability to play back that profile on a particular battery. So you can do exactly that same discharge as flying, for example, right on the bench. So you then have the opportunity to try different batteries and say which batteries work better for the particular application that I'm going to be using. Anyway, CBA is a lot of fun. So if you're doing anything battery-wise, that might be a nice tool to pick up. A little bit about uninterruptible power supplies. The PG40S, very, very popular. Many of you probably already have it. It's been out for years, one of the West Mountain Radio's more popular products. This is just a functional diagram here. Essentially, both the power supply and the battery feed your radio with diodes. So the battery's not going to run the power supply or vice versa. And then if you have power, AC power, there's a smart battery charger in there to keep that battery charged. When you lose power, you don't even see a flicker on the radio. It just switches right over for you. One of the common questions we have is, what about multiple batteries? If the battery is the same age and the same type, it's okay to connect them in parallel. You may want to periodically remove one of those jumpers and just put a current meter in there instead, and just make sure that there's not too much current flowing from one battery to the other. The one thing that we're concerned about in this kind of a situation is you have a bad battery, and a good battery is spending its whole life trying to charge that bad battery, and that's generating a lot of extra heat that shouldn't be generating, not to mention the energy loss. But in general, if the batteries are the same age, the same type, they're going to work together just fine. Solar power, also very hot. Here's some numbers here just to give you an idea. A 100-watt solar panel, 43 inches by 36 inches is pretty typical. On Amazon, I'm seeing about $1 a watt for a plain panel. It can go up to about $2 a watt if it's fancy. You know, you have a stand and a shelf order or a carrying case or whatever. This is another chart that was generated from our CBA. What it did is a sweep on a solar panel. In other words, it started at 0 amps and it slowly went up to 1 amp and all the way up to 5 amps. And then it showed you how many watts it was able to draw out of the solar panel based on what current it was drawing from it. The solar panels seem to have a sweet spot. This one looks like somewhere around 4 amps is where you get the maximum wattage out. So it's not a constant kind of a thing like you would expect, where the more current draw is, the less watts, or that the watts be steady. So solar panels have a sweet spot. And while I'm here, this is actually 2 charts. If you'll notice, the one that I showed you earlier, and if you look very carefully in the lower left corner, there's another plot. I superimposed that on there. This is the same solar panel. One of them is pointed at the sun, and then one is pointed at the northern sky, which is plenty bright, but not the sun. So it's important when you're using solar panels that you are pointed at the sun, and I should also point out the sun moves. With the PG40S that we were talking about earlier, you can connect a solar panel to a charge controller to the battery, and that can be in parallel with PG40S. In general, it's okay to connect battery chargers in parallel. The MPPT there, that's the type of solar charger that you would want to use on a solar panel, because what it does is it finds that sweet spot that we talked about earlier, and that's the current that it draws from the solar panel, and then it'll convert that current to whatever voltage it needs to charge the battery. So it tries to find the sweet spot on the solar panel, so you get a maximum amount of energy out of the solar panel. But again, it's okay to connect chargers, charge controllers in parallel with other chargers. We have a new product, the Epic Power Gate, to replace the PG40S. The Epic has a charge controller built in, and it is an MPPT type controller. So you can connect it directly to a solar panel in addition to the power supply source and the battery source. Other than that, it's similar to the PG40S, except that although I've got diodes shown here, we're using FETs inside for the switching, and the FETs have a much lower voltage drop. If you guys remember what the PG40S looked like, it was a giant heat sink is what it looks like. This thing generates very little heat because it's got very little voltage drop. PG40S, just a standard diode, you're going to get about 1/3 of a volt drop across the diode. Here we're getting like 0.01 volt drops typically. That is my presentation. Do we have any questions?
Hey, Mark, I had a
Holy
question.
cow, thank you.
So, Mark, you were talking about the design of starter batteries and where it is basically not really a good option. But what about deep cycle batteries? How is deep cycle batteries different from starter batteries? And because they say that they can hold a charge longer and such as that, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, that if you were to put the batteries into two big categories, it would be deep cycle and starter. So the deep cycle is what you want. You just have to be a little bit careful because the deep cycle batteries seem to be so popular when they put that on the side of the battery. There are batteries that are labeled deep cycle that aren't really. Um, what you want to what you want is the type of a battery that you would use, for example, on a boat trolling motor, because you're going to run that thing down, charge it up, run it down, charge it up. So if the advertising on the battery is talking about how many cold cranking amps it has and how it's going to start your car in cold weather, it's probably not really a deep cycle battery. If they're talking about how this is for marine use, how this is for trolling motor use, that's the kind of battery that you want.
Hey, Mark, jump in here real quick. You talked a little bit about charging batteries at different temperatures. What about just storing batteries at different temperatures? I have a very expensive lithium ion on my camper, and we're getting these down to 0 temperatures coming through here. Do I need to bring it in?
They say no, they can last just fine in the colder temperatures, but what they want you to do is to keep the battery at roughly the 40% charged rate, which I know is kind of hard. If it's a long-term storage thing, you're going to keep it out in the garage for a while, or if you're shipping it to somebody, they say to drain it down to about the 40% level, and that's the safest place for it to be sitting for storage.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll ask one, there's so many different types of solar cells out these days. What do you advise as far as a good solar cell for the house, the type that they're putting out that would keep the batteries in good shape?
It's a hard question to ask because it changes so often. There are two basic types, but really for the kind of use that we're using and the power that we're using, you're not going to see much of a difference. We're not going to compare how good a 3-inch by 3-inch panel is from one technology to another, because you guys are all going to use stuff that's multiple feet. I really think the best is to just search around and look for a good deal, because it seems like every time I do a search, it's a different manufacturer, a different type that's got a good deal. If you're using it with our Epic Power Gate, one thing to remember is we've got the charge controller built in. A lot of the panels have a charge controller on the back. You don't need that. Size-wise, I typically recommend something in the 100 to 150 watt range. Some people say, well, I've got these 6 panels that comes out to 600 watts. Should I go ahead and use them or whatever? If you have more panels, that means you're going to get more energy with less light. So there's no harm in doing that. Yeah, typically about 100 to 150 watts is a good size. 150 watts seems to be very popular. But I would look a little bit too at how the thing mounts and what kind of mounting stuff it comes with. The lithium batteries, the Bioenno's got a very popular one that's being used in the amateur radio world. I know Bioenno also sells solar panels that are sort of in a suitcase. A lot of people have said that's really nice. They're probably a little bit on the overpriced side, but like I say, that's very convenient and it's a good company to be buying from.
A follow-up to that also is the number of batteries. Is there a good number of batteries to have as far as a battery bank is concerned?
It's really going to come down to what you need amp hour wise. Like I say, if you are going to have a large battery bank, you should always, periodically just measure the current draw to make sure there's not a bad battery in the bunch. So that's a little bit of maintenance concern. But it really comes down to how many amp hours you use. And again, we have that calculator on our website, so you can figure out, if you say, what I need to do is I need to survive a 48-hour power fail or whatever, and this is the way I use my equipment, just figure out the amp hours from there.
I have a question about the lithium ions, the form factor. When building a battery bank out of lithium, would you use a automotive form factor, a golf cart form factor, a remote control car form factor? What would be the best form factor to buy lithium in to build a battery bank?
The lithium is going to be a lot smaller. We build these battery boxes up of one of the products that West Mountain Radio does. And we use a standard car battery container for the car batteries. For lithium, we get a ammo container, which is considerably smaller, got a nice handle on it. They're rugged, and we use those for the lithium batteries. So yeah, it's going to be a lot smaller. So you're not going to be seeing your typical car battery kind of stuff, and it's going to be a lot lighter too, as far as carrying it around. I know we built a battery box here. I'm sorry, a Go box recently, and it's sometimes hard to find the off-the-shelf lithium batteries in exactly the form factor that you need, because you might have a shallow place. You might want something that's really long and shallow. There are guys who are actually putting together these lithium batteries custom made to whatever you want. So if you want something that's more pancake shaped than a rectangle or a square cube, there are people out there that'll do that for you.
Well, these electric scooters and electric remote control cars, they have 3C, right, which I guess stands for 3-cell, and 6C batteries. Is it better to buy a lot of those smaller ones and gang them together, or would you go with the largest lithium you could get?
I'm very skeptical about connecting lithiums together unless they come that way. The reason is a lot of the lithium batteries have electronics in them so that they're charged properly and discharged safely. And it's not clear to me that electronics works well together with another battery. So for example, if I bought 2 bioenno batteries and connected them in parallel, I'm not confident that the electronics is going to work properly in that kind of a situation than just using the battery by itself. So I would stick with an entire battery that was made by the manufacturer together rather than trying to put them in parallel. The C marking on the batteries, like the 3C or the 6C, they may be referring to the maximum discharge rate on the battery. So if I have a 20 amp hour battery and it's labeled 1C, that means I can at most draw 20 amps at a time out of the battery. If it says 3C, that means I can draw 60 amps at a time out of the battery.
I see. Thank you.
Have you looked at any of the enhanced flooded batteries yet?
I'm sorry, could you speak just a little louder?
I said, have you looked at any of the enhanced flooded batteries yet?
Enhanced what technology?
Enhanced flooded. So lead acid.
Flooded.
Oh, we have not. No, we have customers who study those by them for the CBA stuff, but no, I don't have any experience with that.
Mark, do you have any buck converters? We've got a project working that would involve, let's say, a tethered drone. And to your very first couple of slides, that IR loss stuff is what the concern is. Anything that you have that or have seen that would take a voltage and up that voltage to maybe 200 volts DC to get up the line for a 100 or 200 foot run of tethered cable. At some point, carrying 1/0 cable gets to be tough to get rid of those losses, and when you got to drop it back down to 48 or so when you're up at the top. Is there anything that you think of that could make that a better trip up the wire?
So you're looking at boosting the voltage up to account for the voltage loss in the cable?
Yeah, to try and get that, reduce some of those IR losses, instead of running the 40 volts or so that the drone will need. Is there anything you can think of that you could say put a 200 volt signal up, and then a buck converter or something like 20 amps is the game on those things?
20 amps. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you get it.
No, I'm sorry. Don't have a good solution for you on that one.
Okay.
But it sounds like a fun project.
If you want to get involved, I will send details. I think I saw Nathan, who's heading that project on the list here. So, yeah, it looks to be an issue. Is how do you get power up there without your first 3 slides nailed right? Our problem right on the head with the IR.
Yeah. If people don't notice it, I mean, everybody knows Ohm's law. You don't notice it at the low currents, but it really makes a difference when you start to talk about serious current.
Yeah.
So also point out, Orlando is trying to do a virtual handfest this weekend. We've got a booth set up on our website, westmountainradio.com/show. And through Tuesday, there are a bunch of discounts on a lot of our products. So if you guys want to go visit the show site and get some of those discounts, there's a code on the web page and so on and so forth. So that's a good deal for anybody who's interested in buying anything.
Very good. Yeah, it looks like a good show. Starting up here about 11 o'clock, I think, our time. But they've got some good stuff signed up.
Oh yeah, good prices. And nice diagrams that show you all the pieces you need.
Yeah, we're trying to accommodate the fact that we're not driving around to shows anymore.
Yeah.
So we tried to do up a nice web page. We'll use that at all the various virtual shows.
We should get you to come for our virtual show. And when are we doing that, Mark?
Later in the year, July-ish. And we've talked to them in the past. They were planning to come out for 2020, but that didn't happen.
Well,
that didn't happen.
Oh, look at those diamonds.
You're hyperventilating, Peter.
Well, I'm just. It's if you go to the website that's on the thing there. There is a whole series, if you scroll down, of basically diagrams of all the bits and pieces you need. And of course, you can click on things and buy them because that's the point. But it's also very handy to be able to see it all laid out like that. So thank you, West Mountain Radio.
Okay, on behalf of the club, I'd like to thank Mark for joining us today. It's been pretty educational. We appreciate you taking time out to enlighten us on this. We thank you a lot. With that, I'll turn it back over to Galen.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Man.
Mark, thank you for being here today. We certainly appreciate it. And perhaps sometime in the future, we can get you down here in person again.
All right.
All right. Well, let's move on with the rest of the club meeting. And
switch off the presentation.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Awesome.
Why? Do you want to see me?
No, not really.
I would hope not. Let me move my screens around here.
That was good. That was really good.
All right, so let's move right on. First thing I'd like to do is Don Byer on this morning? Don on? Do we have a Mark or somebody? Do we have an update on Phil and his condition?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Talked to Mr. Phil on Thursday. He is doing real good. He's finishing up his, this past week, he was finishing up his rehab. He's breathing a lot better, sounds wonderful. And he was hoping to be able to come home either today or tomorrow. And they will monitor him from the house. And he said he can't wait to get back on the radio with everybody, especially the MacNet in the morning. Told him we missed him on the MacNet. And he said he was grateful that he got contacts this last week from several of the club members. Kind of boosted him up. And other than that, he's just doing good.
Good deal. Do we have anybody else that we know that's hospitalized or otherwise incapacitated in the club? Anybody? Okay. Perhaps on that note, do we have anybody in the club that's 65 or over that hasn't gotten a vaccine shot that wants one? Okay.
See Mike
If-
waving his hand there.
I'm sorry, say again, Peter?
Mike was waving his hand.
I don't think you can help me down here.
You're in Texas. No one can help you.
In 4.
Everything's bigger in Texas. Okay. If there are any of our club members that meet that 65 and over that haven't got a shot that want one, if you'll get a hold of Grizzle or get a hold of myself, we'll see if we can't get you hooked up. I think they're trying to get those finished up. And I believe here in about a week, they're going to start on the some of the next group, which are our teachers and those folks under 65, but which have comorbidities that put them at higher risk. So we'll see how that goes.
I have a question about those shots.
Okay, go ahead. I may or may not know the answer, but.
Well, I've already had COVID, and there's 3 groups of people. Some say I shouldn't get the shot. Some say I should get one shot, but not the second shot. And some say I should get both shots. So you have any information on that?
David Grizzle, are you on? If so, my understanding is that you should still go ahead and get your full shot series. But Grizzle, are you on?
Yeah, that's the propaganda. I mean, the CDC comes out and says if you've had COVID, you should still go ahead and get the shot, and they justify that with the mutation of the virus coming out of UK and coming out of Africa, that it will help guard against any future mutations here in the United States.
My sister works for the health department, has had COVID, and she was given the shot 60 days afterwards. Their statement was the same thing, was that even though you have antibodies to the one strain that you were set at, and you do not have the wide ranged antibodies. And the second piece is they don't know how long those antibodies last, because they don't know how sick you were and how many were generated. So yes, take both shots.
And the real answer, of course, is, visit with your personal care physician and discuss options with them, of which I've had discussions with mine. And so just, don't cut out your own doctor out of the loop.
Okay.
Galen, I'll add one other thing. I had the infusion therapy, and which you get an IV started and it lasts for an hour, and then they monitor you for an hour after that. But because of it has the more than one antibody in it, the health department says to wait at least 90 days, if not longer, afterwards before you even think about an injection.
Okay. All right. I see we have one of the comment direct messages. If you'll just get a hold of David or myself, and we'll see if we can't get you hooked up, or get you with the people that can get you hooked up. We can't do it. But. All right, Peter Laws, VE.
Holy cow. Mark, can you throw up the, there you go. What does it say? I can't read it. I made it and I can't read it. Click here. There we go. Yes, there we go. We had a big session the other week. We tried to spread them out. That kind of worked. We didn't really have any point of time where there was too many people in the room, which was the goal. But we managed to bake 6 new hams. A couple, Kelly and Ronald there, drove all the way up from Louisiana. No, where were they from? Mark, help me out here. Was it Walters? No. No, it wasn't Walters. What was the town they were from? You don't remember either? Okay. Anyway, we had a bunch of out of town folks. We had a bunch of in town folks. They're all happy technicians now. And then we had K5SRJ and W5JWZ, who at least one of those is here, I think, upgraded to general. So, yay!
Those two were from Idabel area. They drove 3.5 hours to get to the test.
Yeah.
And I think another couple came from Walters, Oklahoma.
Yep. Yep.
And I talked to Ben day before yesterday. Nice guy.
Yep. Very good. Good. Yeah. If you hear any of these new call signs on the air, please say hi to them and don't scare them away. Kelly and Ronald were the couple from way down southeast there. She didn't have any trouble with the test. Ronald, it took 2 tries, but that's okay. He got it. So, and she likes her call sign. She says she probably remember that with November. So, yeah, it was a good session. We got another one coming up on March 4th. Virus permitting. We'll see how that goes. Same deal. We've already got people signed up. We've got 4 people, I think, signed up for it already. So.
What a great deal. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. FCC has the report and order that came out around the end of the year about the fee thing has yet to be published in the Federal Register. And until it is published in the Federal Register, it will not go into effect. And when it is published, it'll be 30, 60, 90 days after that. I now know more about the Federal Register than I did before. I even subscribe to updates from the FCC now. And so as soon as I see that show up in my mailbox, I will let the club know when the fees are coming. Denny should be able to renew his license online now without a fee. He was the only one that was on the cusp of expiration. His 90-day window, I believe, is open now. You can renew your license up to 90 days before you expire and up to 2 years after you expire. You can't operate after you expire, but you can get your call sign back without a test within 2 years of your expiration date. And we've had several people, I've been able to cajole them into actually doing that. Don't ever let your license expire. It's free now. It's going to be $35 in the future, but Congress is fickle. That could go away. For a long time, we had an exemption, a specific exemption from fees. Congress chose not to include that in their latest law. So the FCC didn't have a choice but to include us in the fee structure. So, but again, has not yet taken effect. It will, but it has not yet. So I think that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Pardon me. We'll switch quickly to the club's finances. First of all, dues are due. Yes, we have dues. Yes, they are due.
PayPal.
Pay them. Pay up. We'll send
PayPal.
Guido after you. Hank Hamner, very quick financial report, please.
Good luck.
Is Hank still with us?
He's muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
There you go.
All right. The club's still in good financial condition. The dues that we have received through January is comparable to last year. We've got several new members, and we can hopefully get more people to pay their dues before the end of the first quarter at least. But we haven't had any expenses or very light expenses, so our bank account is holding up real well, and there's really nothing to report. Very little expenses, and that's about it. The financials should be on the club's website, including the membership roster. Any questions?
Very good. Any questions for Hank? I turned my head for a minute. I don't know if you mentioned this. At the moment, we have not put together a budget for this year. Budgeting is going to be very difficult since we have no idea of what COVID's going to do to us in terms of our things that we do spend money on. So we're kind of rocking along at the moment. We'll probably try and put something together, at least as a shell for the interim, and then see whether the COVID numbers continue to go down and whether the rules relaxed where we can start doing real in-person things again. Any other comments on that, Hank?
No, I think your answer about the COVID being able to forecast expenses is just, you're right. Can't forecast membership very easily, and certainly can't forecast expenses. But I will tell you one thing is that we're not spending any money. Period. I mean, it's very light. I mean, we might have some small charges, but it's nothing, and you can see it on the financial statements. And we're probably getting in more money per quarter on the Amazon Smile, which is something that's really helpful, than we're spending right now. So anyway, it's just status quo. We're holding up the bank, and we haven't spent any big money, so we're in good shape.
And we do have new memberships coming in.
Exactly. And that I'm very appreciative of. The enthusiasm that the new members bring is great for the club.
Good deal. And again, dues are due. Pay your dues. We'll send Guido after you again.
Go to the website. You can do PayPal. You don't have to touch anything.
There you go. All right, Ed Hatch, did I see you on a while ago? If so, do you have anything from the trustee side of the house? Hello, Ed.
I don't see him on.
Okay. He was earlier, but that doesn't mean that he is now. Okay, well, I'm not aware of anything. Nothing's been brought to me. Mark Klein, anything from the technical committee? How's things running?
Everything's running like it should. The Broadcastify piece was down for a day or two. Thanks to Gary for pointing that out. And that got rebooted, I believe, yesterday or the day before. And it's putting the 06 signal out on the big internet, but everything else is going good.
Is that something that we manage, or is somebody else just doing that?
I have that here at my property. It comes in. It comes in a little software-defined receiver, goes through a Raspberry Pi and goes out to broadcastify.com. Shows up as radio reference or any of the scanners that you got hooked up to your cell phones.
Very good. Net reports. Do we have anybody that has a report for their net? Peter, go ahead.
We run a siren net every Saturday noon, but not today. Well, I mean, W5NOR will be on the air at noon in case there are reports from Noble and Newcastle. There probably will not be. Officially, both Norman and Moore have canceled audible testing on account of the weather. I guess for the mechanical ones, I guess you don't really want to run them in the cold if you really don't have to. Is that right, Galen?
Oh, occasionally if they get some moisture up in the moving parts and it freezes up, then things tend to break.
Yeah, and we don't want that. And for a test, that's really not necessary. So no testing today in Moore and Norman, probably not in Noble and Newcastle, but I'll be on the air in case there are reports from those cities. Otherwise, those nets continue as needed. So
I think I saw David say that Newcastle's system is still out of action.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, he did reply to my email. Yes, it's still, not working. So it's a money thing. I mean, some of these smaller towns just don't have the budget to keep this stuff up. So.
Well, and I suspect they've had some expenses with having to change their public safety radio system around too. So those of you don't know, they lost their tower back. Yeah, and it was contracted, and now it's not. Anyway.
Yeah. We had that ice storm, that stealth ice storm back. What was that? November, October? It was
late October.
Yeah, it was way too early. And they had a tower collapse, which is a problem if you dispatch your police and fire on radio, which they all do. So yeah, so Newcastle's yeah, out of service for the time being. So
Yeah, their radios are back up, but
yeah, right. But sirens are down on their list. So
yeah,
and rightfully so.
Due to
Bill
the
Baker, net report.
Well, barring the blizzard of 2021, next Wednesday, we will try to have a 10-meter net. 8 o'clock Central Time on 28.445 upper sideband. We've been running 12, 15 people, I guess, an evening, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But come and join us.
Thank you, sir. Is Jim or somebody with the 6-meter net on? I haven't had the opportunity lately. I assume it's still running just fine. Monday nights, 8 p.m. I know Phil's not around for the Aries net. I don't see Randy. I've been away from it for a week or two, but remember the amateur radio emergency services net is always Tuesday night. And
I covered it last Tuesday. Davey.
Okay, I see you now.
Yeah, I covered it last Tuesday because they were pretty late getting a start. I guess Jim had it. Must have got sidetracked or something, but I jumped on in there and we took care of it.
Way to go.
And I have a question for Peter when he gets a chance.
Okay, and then and remember too that during emergency conditions, the Aries net can come up at any time for formal or for assisting the public safety entities as needed. So remember that one. That may be in play this week. We'll see.
I have a question.
Who has a question? Go ahead.
Mark, N5ACQ. I got a question on the Aries net. It's just off the web, the club's repeater 2-meter.
The Aries, yes, the Aries net is Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. On the 2-meter repeater.
Is there a backup DMR for that as well?
What?
DMR is not in the backup plan.
Yeah, the backup plan is the other VHF repeater,
14688.
the 88 machine.
Okay. Just
and then
curious.
the UHF is 443.7, which would be the tertiary.
Okay.
But having said that, there's a regular DMR Aries net on Monday nights, correctly?
There is one on every Monday night at 8:15 p.m. We have the Oklahoma statewide Aries net on talk group 3401.
3140.
Thank you. Yeah, one of those numbers. And we have been having great response. We've been having people from not only all over the state, but all over the country checking in. We always try to do a little education session along with it.
Very good.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I have a question. Isn't
Go
there
ahead,
isn't there another DMR net on Thursday evenings? Does that have to do with Aries?
There is a Thursday night all multi-mode, multi-connection. If Larry's still on, he might have some input. D-Star, they connect the whole world on Monday nights. I'm sorry, on Thursday nights.
That is no longer going.
Oh, it is not? Okay. So no, that's not happening. I need to adjust my stuff.
Okay, Denny, I think I saw you on earlier. How about the gossip net?
Yep. Turn your microphone on, Denny.
You're muted, Denny.
Denny, I think you're muted.
Nobody's ever said that ever.
Nope, not on a Zoom call. No way.
I see Denny. He just needs to turn his microphone on.
Oh, is it charades? How many words?
I'll go.
Okay, well,
hang on.
5 words.
Yeah, how about the gossip net is on Tuesday nights on the 2-meter repeater as well, and it follows the Aries net or at 8:30, whichever comes last. Uh-oh, getting assistance. Okay, well, we'll move on. And I assume there's still a YL net on Thursday night. I haven't seen Michelle, but I think that's still active as well. Does anybody have any other information on that one?
It is still active.
Good deal. All right. As I said early on, the executive committee met Wednesday night. Yes, we are still around. One of the pieces of business that as a club we need to transact is to confirm the 3 at-large board members and our trustees. I think for right now, since we can't vote in person and it's very difficult to raise hands and be able to see everybody, especially since we're using 2 different streaming platforms. Let me just say that the at-large members at the moment are John Burrows and Bill Baker. We need to fill the 3rd one yet. Our trustees are Ed Hatch and Chad Cunningham. If anyone has issues with that, would you please contact me? And then we'll see in the future if we can't schedule some sort of Zoom survey, club website, something. But I think until we're able to meet in person, assuming that no one has any issues with those appointments, then we're going to go ahead and let them rock along and do their business. And then when we're able to meet in person with a nice quorum, then we'll formally vote to confirm those people. And if anybody has an issue with that policy, again, if you'll contact me, otherwise we're going to assume that everybody's fairly much in agreement. If you're not in agreement, let me know, and then we'll do something next meeting. Field day. Yes, we're going to try and do field day. The plan at the moment, as discussed by your executive committee a couple of nights ago, is that we want to go ahead and plan for a regular, normal, in-person field day. The plan then, if we'll watch it as we get closer to time. It's much easier to plan for the full thing and then have to scale it back than not plan for it and then try and throw something together at the last minute if we're able. So we're going to go ahead and plan for a full in-person, regular, normal field day activity. And then if necessary, we'll scale that back. Our event coordinator at the moment is Mark Klein, or incident commander, however you wish to call it. There will be several different parts of that pieces. If you've never been involved with the planning of field day, let me assure you that there are multiple pieces, multiple different things. You have the technical side, you have the operating side, you have trying to find personnel that want to operate in the middle of the night. You have where do you put your CW? Where do you put your antenna so they don't kill each other? We haven't even talked about food yet, facilities and so on. So each one of those probably will have some sort of lead for those. If you're interested in doing that, I would contact Mark, or if you want, contact me. Either way, Mark's probably easier to get a hold of. And we'll plan for a full in-person field day and see how things go.
Galen, that information is all on the website and the field day site, w5nor.org/FD.
Very good. Any comments or questions about field day? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that ARRL has also this year stated that they will do similar to last year, to where if you wish to operate individually, you may do so, and then as long as you turn your stuff in with a club name that matches exactly what is on their records, then the club, it'll add to the club's totals.
The only
I
difference
know
is this year there's 150 watt maximum.
Yep, it just hadn't got there yet.
Okay.
But I know that a number of us last year operated individually and came together, and we had a nice time, had a nice score, given the circumstances and given that COVID was fairly still new at that point. But there was also a limited in-person component to that was operated out of the EOC Fire Training Center, and I believe you guys hung antennas off of the drill tower and found that worked fairly well, and so both components, both the individual component and the in-person component, I thought worked very well last year. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments about field day? Lee, is your hand up, or is it just where you have it?
It's just the way I had it. I do have a question later on about EOC.
Okay. Well, sorry, I wasn't sure whether that was one of these or just like what I do, which is trying to stay awake.
That's it.
Did we have anybody that participated in Winter Field Day?
Yes, we did is the answer, but I don't know if they're all on.
From home.
Yeah, from home. There was nothing. Yeah, everything was from home.
Yeah, there was no in-person component, but
This
okay.
weekend would be good training for that.
Yeah, you can work outside. I was one of the individuals for regular field day, and I set up a tent and all sorts of equipment. No, I will not be doing that this week. Interestingly enough, I have the builder of our mobile command vehicle contacted me last week and said, "Oh, we have a client that wants to come see it. They're coming Wednesday."
Didn't you
Will
go
I
to?
be pulling the truck outside and raising the mast? Not planning on it. Fortunately, it's in a heated barn, so we're okay there. But of course, the truck was built in Kalispell, Montana, and when we did the pre-delivery, it was 4 above that morning. So it's used to cold. It's seen cold before, but somewhere else, not here.
You'd be in a pickle if you got that mast up and wouldn't be able to get it back down.
Yeah, well, you do what you have to do. If we've got to go somewhere and need it, we'll take it. Actually, we had a little bit of a house. Yikes. Sorry, got tangled up in cables underneath here. We had a house fire last night. Fortunately, they caught it before it got very far, and we got to back off the automatic aid, and I wasn't out very long, and they said, "Why don't you go home? We don't need you here." So, and they left shortly thereafter too. So remember our public safety responders this week. It's going to be really, really, really cold, but we still have fires. We still have law enforcement events. We still have medical events. So
are you saying they didn't have to tell you to return to quarters twice? They only needed to
Oh,
tell
I
you
didn't.
one time?
I didn't blaze out that quick, but I could have left much sooner than I chose to. But
We
it was kind of
everything you do.
It was kind of cool out in the, it was snowing a little bit, and there was lights, and of course the blinky lights on the trucks, and as long as you didn't stay out very long, get too cold, it wasn't bad.
Hey, Galen,
Yes, go ahead.
since you're talking about house fires real quick, and before I say something, Peter, I sent you a chat message. The process Red Cross goes through now to help a burnout victim in a fire is a little bit monotonous. And if anybody, during this next couple of days, what happened to us in 09, we had a lot more house fires in Norman and burnouts than what we should have had because people were doing dumb things. but the Red Cross does basically everything as much as they can virtual, and very much limits the people coming out to the homes anymore. So now that Galen brought that to my attention, there's a real good possibility I may be jumping on the air to get people to try to go to a house if we have a situation, for the sole purpose of being an official person that the Red Cross can visit with. Because what happens is when I know it's a house, when I know it's a burnout, when I know that they're not going to go back in that house, I usually go out on scene with a family and I interface that. Red Cross calls me, they validate that yes, indeed, there's a house fire. They have to have an official person look at the family's ID or form of verification that they live there and validate that to the Red Cross on scene. Now, what happens if I'm not available, then they're expecting the fire guys to do that. And our fire guys are kind of busy putting out fire or messing with that. So I jump in there and try and bridge that gap. So the next thing they do is they assign that to a case manager who wants to physically call the family on their phone, iPhone or whatever. They want to FaceTime them if possible and do an interview. They go through their little interview thing on the phone to determine the amount of assistance they're going to get. And then the next thing they've started doing is if the individual has a credit card or a checking account, they will do an electronic funds transfer. We had a trailer fire, lower income mobile home area there behind what used to be Marquette Chevrolet. Hispanic speaking, thank God the 14-year-old daughter spoke English and translated, did not have a checking account. So in that case, then they dispatch somebody from Red Cross with a credit card. They come out, hand it to them, make them sign for it, tell them how to use it and everything. So the Red Cross process is very extended. So that over this weekend, and we got a thing at noon internally to Norman Command, or afternoon after the weather thing. So I'll get with Mary Jane on that and might visit with her about, using you guys to go out if you're available to help do that verification. Because the process for this weekend is going to be highly flexible. Could we start having a lot of stranded motorists? Because they're basically going to follow the same thing. They're going to want to do the interview with the individual to determine whether or not they can take care of themselves or go to family, or if in fact Red Cross needs to step in and help fund anything. So thanks, Galen. I just kind of thought that need to go out there.
The good news of this event, while it's going to be cold and while it's going to be snowy, the snow is supposed to be dry and fluffy and powdery, and so it's going to blow, but it's not going to necessarily be the wet, let's stick together, go build a snowman type stuff. So I'm hoping that we don't have the stranded motorist issues. We're not expecting any ice at all. It's going to be all snow. So we shouldn't have a lot of freeze on the power lines go down, that sort of thing. So, but as David said, stay tuned. We'll see what really happens. And it very well may be that we need some assistance with communications as well. If so, David will call, I will call, and we'll activate the Aries side of it. There also is some possibility here in a week that our health department is planning a huge vaccination clinic, depending on whether they can get the vaccine to do it. And that may be an all hands on deck event as well. Again, we'll get back with you. So anything else for the good of the club? All right, well, in that case, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. We'll do this again next month. Your club officers are always watching the actual conditions to see if we can't get back to in-person meetings. I doubt that will happen next month. Hopefully when it starts getting warm, we'll find a way to do that either indoors or outdoors somewhere where we can if necessary, still distance, but yet have some camaraderie as well.
I had a question for Peter.
Yes, go
Uh,
ahead.
Okay, hang on. Before you do, let's go ahead and disband. Everybody have a good month, and we'll see you on the air. Tune up and get on the air. And we'll see y'all later. The club meeting's over. And if you need to hang around and visit, go ahead.